What's going on, everybody? This your boy Ryan Link. I told you I'm gonna read Think and Grow Rich, and I'm gonna read chapter 1, and it's called The Power of Thought. The man who thought his way into partnership with Thomas A. Edison. Truly, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that. When mixed with purpose, persistence, and a burning desire for their translation into riches or material object, Edwin C. Barnes discovered how true it is that men really do think and grow rich. His discovery did not come about in one sitting. It came little by little, beginning with a burning desire to become a business associate of the great Thomas Edison. One of the chief characteristics of Barnes' desire was that it was definite. He wanted to work with Edison, not for him. Observe carefully the description of how he went about translating his desire into reality, and you will have a better understanding of the 13 principles which lead to riches. When this desire or impulse of thought first flashed unto his mind, he was in no position to act upon it. Two difficulties stood in his way. He did not know Mr. Edison, and he did not have enough money to pay off his rail fee to Orange, New Jersey. These difficulties were significant to have discouraged the majority of people from making any attempt to carry out the desire. But his was no ordinary desire. He was so determined to find a way to carry out his desire that he finally decided to travel by blind baggage rather than be defeated. To the uninitiated, this means that he was to East Orange on a freight train. He presented himself at Edison Laboratory and announced he has come to go into business with the inventor. In speaking of the first meeting between them years later, Mr. Edison said, "He stood there before me, looked like an ordinary tramp, but there was something in his expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he had came after. I had learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires things so deeply that he is willing to stake an entire future on a single turn of the wheel in order to get it, he is sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he had made up his mind to stand by till he succeeded. Subsequent events proved that no mistake was made. Just what young Barnes said to Mr. Edison on that occasion was far less important than what he thought. Edison himself said so. I could not have been the young appearance that got him his start in the Edison office. For that, it was definitely against him. It was what he thought that counted. And the significance of this statement can be conveyed to every person who reads it. There would be no need for the remainder of this book. Barnes did not get his partnership with Edison on his first interview. He did get a chance to work in the Edison office at a very normal wage, doing work that was unimportant to Edison but was important to Barnes. It gave him an opportunity to display his merchandise where his intended partner could see it. Months went by. Apparently nothing happened to bring the convex goal, which Barnes had set up in his mind as his definite major perfect. But something important was happening in Barnes' mind. He was constantly intensifying his desire to become the business associate of Edison. Psychologists had correctly said, when one is truly ready for a thing, it puts itself in appearance. Barnes was ready for a business associate with Edison. Moreover, he was determined to remain ready until he got which he was seeking. He did not say to himself, "Oh well, what's the use? I guess I'll change my mind and try for a salesman job." But he did say, "I came here to go into business with Edison, and I will accomplish this end if it takes the remainder of my life." He meant it. What a different story people would have to tell if they only would adopt a definite purpose and stand by that purpose until it had time to become an all-consuming obsession. Maybe young Barnes did not know it at the time, but his bulldog determination, his persistence with a single desire, was destined to mow down all opposition and bring him into the opportunity he was seeking. When the opportunity came, it appears in a different form and from a different direction than Barnes had expected. That is one of the tricks of opportunity. It has a sly habit of slipping in by the back door and often comes disguised in form of misfortune or temporary defeat. Perhaps this is why so many fail to recognize opportunity. Mr. Edison had just perfected a new office device known as, at that time, the Edison dictating machine, later called the Ediphone. His salesman was not executed over that machine. did not believe it could be sold without great effort. Barnes saw his opportunity. It crawled in quietly hidden in a conveyor-looking machine that interests no one but Barnes and the inventor. Barnes knew he could sell the Edison dictating machine. He suggested this to Edison and promptly got his chance. He did sell the machine. In fact, he sold it so successfully that Edison gave him a contract to distribute and market it all over the nation. One of the business associates grew up in the slogan, "Made by Edison, installed by Barnes." This business alliance made Barnes rich in money, but he accomplished something infinitely greater. He proved that he was one really made thing and grow rich. How much actual cash the original design of Barnes was worth to him, I have no way of knowing. Perhaps it brought him $2 or $3 million. Whatever the amount is, become insignificant when compared with the greater asset he acquired. The definite knowledge that was an intangible impulse of thought can be transmuted into physical counterpart by the application of known principles. Barnes literally thought himself into a partnership with the great Edison. He thought himself into a fortune. He had nothing to start with except the capacity to know what he wanted and determination to stand by that desire until he realized it. He had no money to begin with. He had but little education. He had no influence, but he did have initiative, faith, and the will to win. With these intangible forces, he made himself #1 man with the greatest inventor who ever lived. Now let's look at a different situation and study a man who had plenty of tangible evidence of riches, but lost it because he stopped 3 feet short of the goal he was seeking. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is outtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. R.U. Darby, who later became one of the most successful insurance salesmen in the country, tells the story of his uncle who was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went west to dig and grow rich. He did hear the saying that more gold had been mined from the brains of men than has ever been taken from the earth. He staked a clay and went to work and picked up his shovel. The going was hard, but his lust for gold was definite. After weeks of labor, he was rewarded by the discovery of shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface. Quietly, he covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland, and told his relatives and a few neighbors of the strike. They got together money for the needed machinery, and it had shipped. The uncle and Darby went back to work at the mine. Their first car ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The return proved by they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. A few more cars of that ore would clear the debts. Then would come the big killing and profits. Down with the drills, up the hopes of Darby and uncle. Then something happened. The veins of gold ore disappeared. They had came to the end of the rainbow, and the pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on desperately, trying to pick up the vein again, all to no avail. Finally, they decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man a few $100s and took the train back home. Some junk men are dumb. Not this one. He called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and did a little calculating. The engineer advised that the project had failed because the owner was not familiar with fault line. His calculations showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling. That is exactly where it was found. The junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Most of the money went into the machinery and was produced through the efforts of R.U. Darby, who was then a very young man. The money came from his relatives and neighbors. Because of their faith in him, he paid back every dollar of it, although he was years in doing so. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his losses many times over when he made the discovery that desire was transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into the business of selling life insurance. Remember that he had a huge, large fortune because he stopped 3 feet from gold. Darby profited from the experience in his chosen work. His simple method was to say to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold. I would never stop because men say no. When I asked him to buy insurance, he owed his sick ability to the lesson he learned from his quitability in the gold mining business. Before success comes to most people, they are sure to be met with much temporary defeat and perhaps some failures. When faced with defeat, the easy, most logical thing to do is to quit. This is exactly what majority of people do. More than 500 of the most successful people America has ever known told the author their greatest success came from one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes great delight in tripping one up when success is almost within reach. A 50-cent lesson in persistence. Shortly after Darby received his degree from the University of Hard Knocks, he had decided to profit from his experience in the gold mining business. He had the good fortune to present on an occasion that proved him that no does not necessarily mean no. One afternoon, he was helping his uncle grind wheat in an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of sharecroppers farmers lived. Quietly, the door was open. A small child, the daughter of a tenant, walked in, took her place near the door. The uncle looked up, saw the child, and barked at her roughly. "What do you want?" Meekly, the child replied, "My mammy sent her 50 cents. I will not do it," the uncle retorted. "Now you run on home." "Yes, sir," the child replied, and she did not move. The uncle went ahead with his work, so busy engaged, he did not notice that the child had not left. When he looked up and saw her standing there, he yelled at her, "I told you to go on home. Now go or I'll take a switch to you." The little girl said, "Yes, sir," but she did not budge an inch. The uncle dropped a sack of grain when he was about to pour into the mill hopper. He picked up a barrel of shave and started towards the child with expression on his face indicate trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness a murder. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. When the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quickly stepped forward one step and looked up into his eyes and screamed at the top of her lungs, "My mammy got to have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, then slowly laid the barrel stave on the floor, put his hand in his pocket, took out a $50 and gave it to her. The child took the money and slowly backed towards the door, never taking her eyes off the man whom she had just conquered. After she had gone, the uncle sat down on the box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe on the whipping he just had taken. Mr. Darby too was doing some thinking. This was the first time all in his experience that he had seen the child of a sharecropper deliberately master an authority figure. How she do it? What happened to his uncle that caused him to lose his fierceness and become as docile as a lamb? What strange power did this child use that made her master over the superior? These and other similar questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he did not find the answer till years later. When he told the story, strangely the story of this unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill, on the very spot where the uncle took his whipping. As he stood there in that musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest, and finished by asking, "What can you make of it? What strange power did that child use to completely whip my uncle?" The answer to his question was found in the principle described in this book. The answer is full and complete. It contains detailed and instructed to significant to enable anyone to understand and apply the same force that the little child accidentally stumbled upon. Keep your mind alert and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of this power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book you will find an idea will quicken your respective power placed at your command for your own belief, this irresistible power. The awareness of this power may cause you to in the first chapter or may flash into your mind in subsequent chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea or may come in the nature of a plan on a purpose. Again, it may cause you to go back into your past experience of failure or defeat and bring to the surface some lessons from which you can regain all you had lost through defeat. After I described to Darby the power unwittingly used by the little child, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman. He frankly acknowledged that his success in that field was due to in no small degree to the lesson he learned from the child. Mr. Darby pointed out, "Every time a prospect tried to buy me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her big eyes glaring defiant, and said to myself, I gotta make this sale. The bigger portion of all sales I had made were after people had said no." He recalled to his mistakes and in stopping only 3 feet from goal, but he said that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on, no matter how hard the going may be. A lesson I need to learn before I could succeed in anything. This story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the sharecropper child, and the gold mine were doubtless he read by hundreds of people who made their living by selling life insurance. To all of these, the author wishes to offer suggestions that Darby owed to these two experience and his ability to sell more than $1 million of life insurance every year. Life is strange and often imponderable. Both the success and the failure had their roots in simple experience. Mr. Darby's experience were commonplace and are simple enough, yet they held the power to destiny in life. They were as important to him as life itself. He profited by those two dramatic experiences because he analyzed and found the lesson they taught. But what of the person who has neither nor the time of inclination to study failure in search of knowledge that may lead to success? Where and how are they to learn the art of converting defeat into stepping stones to opportunity? In answer to these questions, this book was written. The answer called for the description of 13 principles. However, remember as we read that the answer may be seeking to the question, which had caused you to ponder over the strangeness of life, may be finding out in your own mind. Some idea, plan, or purpose may spring into your mind as you read. One sound of ideas all need to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain the best and most practical way and remain of creating useful ideas. Before we go into any further in our approach to the description of these principles, we believe you are entitled to receive this important message. When riches began to come, they came so quickly in such great abundance that one wondered where they had been hiding during all these lean years. This is an astounding statement, and all more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work hard and long. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe the riches begin with a state of mind, with definition of purpose, with little or no hard work. You and every other person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire a state of mind that will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research analyzing more than 25,000 people because I too wanted to know how wealthy men became that way. Without their research, this book could not have been written. Take a notice of the very significant truth. The business depression started in 1929 and continued on all-time record of destruction and until someone under President Roosevelt entered office. Then the depression began to fade into nothingness, just as the electricity in the theater raises to the light so gradually that darkness is transmitted into light. Before you realize, so did the spell of fear in man in the mind of people gradually fade away and became faith. As soon as you master the principle of this philosophy and begin to follow the instructions applying these principles, your financial status will begin to improve. Everything you touch will begin to transmit itself to an asset for your benefit. Impossible? Not at all. One of the main weaknesses of the mankind is the average person's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules that will not work. He knows all the things that cannot be done. This book was written for those who seek the rules that have made others successful and are willing to stake everything on these rules. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did was turn to the word impossible and neatly clip out of the book. This will not be an unwise thing for you to do. Sometimes success comes for those who become success conscious. Failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek learn the art of changing their mind from failure consciousness to successful consciousness. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impression and belief. Some who read this book will believe that no one can think and grow rich. They cannot think in terms of riches because their habits have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure, and defeat. Millions of people look at the achievement of Henry Ford and envy him his good fortune or luck or genius or whatever it is they credit for Ford's fortune. Perhaps one person in every 100,000 know the secret of Ford's success, and those who know are too modest or too reluctant to speak of it because of its simplicity. A single transaction will illustrate the secret perfectly. When Ford decided to produce his now famous V8 motor, he chose to build an engine with an entire 8-cylinder cast in one block and instructed his engineer to produce a design for the engine. The design was placed on a paper, but the engineer believed it was simply impossible to cast an 8-cylinder gas engine block in one piece. Ford said, "Produce it anyway," but they replied, "It's impossible." "Go ahead," Ford commanded, and stayed on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required. The engineer went ahead. There was no option if they were to remain on Ford's staff. 6 months went by and nothing happened. After 6 months passed and still nothing happened, the engineer tried every conceivable plan to carry out the orders, and the thing seemed out of the question, impossible. At the end of the year, Ford checked with the engineers, and again they informed him they found no way to carry out his orders. "Go right ahead," and said Ford, "I want it and I will have it." They went ahead, and then, as they by a stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. Ford's determination had won once more. This story may not be described with minute accuracy, but the sum and substance of it is correct. Deduce from it, you who wish to think and grow rich. The secret of the 4 million, if you can, would not have looked very far. Henry Ford is a success because he understands and applied the principle of success. One of these is desire, knowing what one's want. Remember this Ford story as you read and picked out the lines in which the secret of stupendous achievements have been described. If you can't do this, you can lay your finger on a particular group of principles that made Henry Ford rich. You can equal his achievement in almost any color for which they suited. The Henry Ford of the late 20th century was Bill Gates. Just as the Ford revolutionized the transportation industry by creating a car that almost anyone could afford, drive, Bill Gates transported the computer industry by designing software that enabled everybody, not just the specialized technocrats, to be able to use computers, and later making the personal computer a virtual necessity in every office, school, and home. This resulted in Bill Gates acquiring billions of dollars and becoming the richest man in America. His first become entranced with computers and beginning programming them at the age of 13 in 1973. He entered Harvard University, where he lived down the road from Steve Ballmer, now Microsoft's chief executive office. While at Harvard, Gates discovered a vision of the programming language BASIC for the first microcomputer. Gates was so absorbed in his dream of building a software company, he left Harvard to devote his energies to fulfilling it. A few years earlier, he and his childhood friend Paul Allen had formed a company, Microsoft, as the vehicle of his endeavors. Guided by belief that the computer would be a valuable tool on every office desktop and every home, they began developing software for personal computers. Gates' foresight and his vision for personal computing had been central to the success of Microsoft and the software industry. Having achieved his major goal, Bill Gates continued to pursue new goals both in business of creating ever-improving computer programs and his philanthropic work, having founded with his wife Melinda the largest charitable foundation in the world. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. When the English poet W.C. Henley wrote the prophetic if I said that right, line, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul," he should be informed that the reason we are the master of our fate and the captain of our souls is because we had the power to control our thoughts. He should have told us that either in which this little planet floats, in which we move and have our being in the form of energy, moving at an conceivably high rate of vibration, that the ether is filled with form of a universal power which adapts itself to the nature of thoughts. He holds in our mind the influence us in natural ways to transmute our thoughts into physical equivalent. If the poet had told us this great truth, we would know why it is that we are masters of our fate, the captain of our soul. He should have told us with great emphasis that this power make no attempt to discriminate between destructive and constructive thoughts. This is will we urge us to translate into physical reality thoughts of poverty just as quickly as it will influence to act upon thoughts of riches. He should have told us too that our brains become magnetized with the dominant thoughts we hold in our minds, by means with which no one is familiar. These magnets attract to us forces the people of the surface of life will harmonize the nature of our dominating thoughts. He should have told us before we can accumulate riches in great abundance, we must magnetize our mind with intense desire for riches, that we must become money conscious until the desire for money drives us to create definite plans for acquiring it. But being a poet and not a philosopher, Henley contented himself by stating a great truth in poetic form, leaving those who follow him to interpret the philosophical meaning of this line. Little by little, the truth unfolded itself, until it now appears certain that the principles described in this book hold the secret of mastery over our economic fate. Another man who exemplified being master of this fate is Steven Spielberg, one of the all-time great motion picture directors. He dreamed of being a movie director from childhood. He began making amateur film with a primitive camera when he was still a child, and the dream never subsided. How Spielberg broke the Universal Studio is a legend in the movie industry. He took the Universal Studio tour, an attraction that enabled visitors to get inside and look at the movie business. Visitor rides around the studio lots on a train. Steven sneaked off the train and hid between two sound stage until the tour ended. When he left it at the end of the day, he made a point of saying a few words to the gate guard. Day after day, he went back to the studio for 3 months. He walked past the guard and waved at him. He waved back. He always wore a suit and carried a briefcase, letting the guard assume he was one of these students with a summer job in the studio. He had a point of seeking to befriend directors, writers, and editors. He even found a vacant office, took it over, and listed his name in the building directory. He made it his business to get to know Sid Sigenberg, the head of production of the studio television arm. He showed him his college film project, which so impressed Scheinberg, he put the young man under contract with the studio. His first full-length film, The Sugarland Express, received critical acclaim and won the Best Screenplay Award in 1974 Cannes Film Festival. Unfortunately, it did not do very well at the box office. His big break came a year later when he discovered the book Jaws. The studio had already decided to produce Jaws and had chosen a well-known director to film it. Spielberg desperately wanted to make the movie. Despite the financial failure of the Sugarland Express, his self-confidence had not diminished, and he persuaded the producer to dismiss the chosen record and give the film to him. It was not an easy assignment. From the beginning, trouble beset the production. It ran into technical and budget problems. However, when Jaws was released in 1975 and enjoyed two full success, it broke box office records and critics loved it. Within the month of release, the film had taken in $60 million at the box office, an unheard amount at the time. Over the next few years, Spielberg directed several movies, including the popular Indiana Jones series, the award-winning The Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, and E.T. He later directed Jurassic Park, which would also become, at least at its time, the most successful movie in history. The third Spielberg film to break the record also brought in over $1 billion in gross receipts, toys, and merchandise. Spielberg continued to pursue this dream when he and two other Hollywood moguls created their own production company they called it DreamWorks. We are now ready to examine the first of these principles, maintain a spirit of open-mindedness. Remember, as you read, that there are inventions of no single person. The principle were gathered from the life experience of more than 500 men who actually accumulate riches in huge amounts, men who began in poverty with little education or influence. The principle worked for these men. You must put them to work for your own enduring benefit. You will find it easy, not hard to do. Before you read the next chapter, I want you to know that it is convoy of factional information that might easily change your entire financial destiny, as it has definitely brought changes of stupendous proportion to two people described. I want you to know also that the relationship between these two men and myself is such that I have taken no liberties with the fact, even if I had wishes to do so. One of them has been my closest personal friend for almost 25 years. The other is my own son. The unusual success of these two men, success that generally a credit to the principle described in the next chapter, more than justify his personal reference as a means of emphasis the far-flung power of this principle. And that, ladies, is the end of chapter 1 of Think and Grow Rich. Like I said, y'all comment below, let me know what you think about it. If you read this book, let me know. Tomorrow I will read chapter 2. And like I said, y'all like, comment, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And like I said, I'm sorry it took long to get on this book, but I'm here now. And like I said, y'all let me know what you think of chapter 1. And comment on it, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And tomorrow, we're going to read chapter 2. Y'all have a good night.